Nobody was supposed to say this out loud. Not on camera. Not on a live stream. Not with names, dates, and a list that allegedly never made it past the cutting room floor. But the moment Jaguar Wright opened her mouth, the entire Diddy documentary narrative collapsed in on itself like a rigged building finally hit with the truth. This wasn't gossip. This wasn't speculation. This was Jaguar claiming there was a real list, a list of powerful names, protected players, untouchable elites, that never made it into the final version of the documentary. And according to her, it wasn't an accident. It was a decision. A deliberate erasure. Even more explosive? Jaguar says 50 Cent didn't just know about it, he helped protect it. The internet froze. Screenshots spread like wildfire. Old interviews resurfaced. Fans started asking the question nobody wanted to ask: why did a documentary marketed as a full exposé feel strangely selective? Why did certain names barely get mentioned, or not mentioned at all? Jaguar didn't whisper. She detonated. She accused the documentary of being a mockumentary, a carefully curated narrative designed to sacrifice one man while shielding others with deeper pockets and stronger connections. She said the truth was watered down, chopped up, sanitized, so it wouldn't threaten the real power structure behind the scenes. And when she hinted that the list still exists, that photos, footage, and names were intentionally cut to protect investors, moguls, and alliances, the internet realized this wasn't about Diddy anymore. This was about who didn't go down with him. And once you hear what Jaguar claims was left out, you'll understand why people are panicking, and why this story feels far from finished. The moment the documentary finished streaming, Jaguar Wright said she didn't feel shocked, she felt insulted. Not because Diddy's downfall was being explored, but because of how carefully the story had been trimmed. She said the version the public saw wasn't the full truth. It was a managed truth. A truth with guardrails. A truth that stopped right before it threatened the people who still have power. And according to Jaguar, that wasn't accidental. That was the plan. She went live with a tone that felt less like commentary and more like someone who'd been holding their breath for years. She called the film a mockumentary, saying it recycled information she and others had already shared publicly while pretending it was a groundbreaking exposé. But then she shifted, and that's when things turned dangerous. She said entire names were missing. Not background names. Not minor players. But pillars. People who were allegedly in the room, on the phones, at the parties, and in the contracts. People who somehow walked away untouched. Jaguar pointed directly at the absence. She asked why a 4-part series about Bad Boy barely mentioned the people who allegedly financed it, owned it, or benefited most from it. She asked why certain moguls were reduced to blink-and-you-miss-it mentions, while others were given full arcs. She asked why footage she says was filmed never aired. And then she dropped the claim that set social media on fire: there was a real list, and it was cut. Within minutes, Twitter turned into a crime scene. Fans started pulling screenshots from the documentary, zooming in on crowd shots, freeze-framing party scenes, asking who was standing next to whom. Reddit threads ballooned overnight. TikTok creators stitched Jaguars live with clips from the doc, pointing out gaps that suddenly felt intentional. The phrase, "cutting room list," started trending, and nobody could agree whether it was paranoia or pattern recognition. Jaguar doubled down. She claimed Netflix wasn't protecting Diddy, they were sacrificing him. According to her, he had become the acceptable monster, the one it was finally safe to burn. But burning him didn't mean burning the system. And that's where she brought 50 Cent into it. She didn't accuse him of inventing the documentary. She accused him of curating it. She said 50 knew exactly what would and wouldn't be allowed to air. That he understood the boundaries. That he played the role of the fearless truth-teller while quietly respecting lines that couldn't be crossed. She didn't frame him as a hero or a villain, she framed him as a strategist. Someone who knew that exposing everything would end the project before it ever saw daylight. And the internet noticed something uncomfortable. For a man known to respond instantly, aggressively, and publicly to even the smallest slight, 50 Cent said nothing. No jokes. No trolling. No threats. No lawsuits. Just silence. And Jaguar's supporters took that silence as confirmation that she was touching something sensitive. As the hours passed, more alleged leaks began circulating. Screenshots of supposed production emails referencing legal concerns. Anonymous accounts claiming interviews were pulled after external pressure. None of it verified. All of it believable enough to spread. And Jaguar kept talking. She pointed out that Gene Deal, a former bodyguard who had spoken openly for years, was suddenly gone from the final cut. She said the official explanation, creative differences, didn't add up. She claimed her own segments were deemed too controversial, despite the documentary already covering graphic allegations. That contradiction became the fuel. Then she raised the question that wouldn't go away: if this was about truth, why were the most powerful people barely present? She mentioned Clive Davis, alleging his influence was minimized despite his alleged financial control. She mentioned Jay-Z, pointing out decades of proximity that somehow evaporated on screen. She didn't say the documentary lied, she said it edited. And editing, she argued, is where narratives are decided. Fans began rewatching with new eyes. A line here. A cut there. A jump that felt abrupt. A missing transition. People started saying the documentary felt rushed in places where it should have lingered. Clean where it should have been messy. And Jaguar kept repeating the same thing: the mess was there. It just didn't make the cut. She claimed there were photos shown to producers that never appeared. Faces blurred. Names removed. Context stripped. She said she was told directly that certain inclusions would complicate distribution. That word, distribution, became the smoking gun for her audience. Because distribution doesn't care about truth. It cares about risk. By the end of her live, Jaguar wasn't even talking about Diddy anymore. She was talking about systems. About how documentaries can be weapons or shields depending on who's holding the blade. About how exposing one person can protect 10 others. And then she said the sentence that froze everything: the list still exists. She didn't show it. She didn't name it fully. She just said it was real, it was known, and it was deliberately left out. And that was enough. Because once people believe something was hidden, they stopped trusting what they were shown. The final seconds of her stream were quiet. No yelling. No theatrics. Just a warning. She said when the truth finally comes out, it won't come through Netflix. It'll come through leaks, mistakes, and people who can't keep quiet forever. And just before the stream cut, she added one more thing. She said the list wasn't cut to protect Diddy. It was cut to protect everyone else. Once Jaguar said that out loud, the entire conversation shifted from, what did the documentary show, to, what was deliberately buried. And that's where the story stopped being about editing choices and started feeling like a cover operation. Because according to Jaguar, the missing pieces weren't small. They were explosive enough to trigger legal teams, investor panic, and what she described as quiet emergency meetings. She claimed the real list wasn't a rumor passed around backstage. It was a document. Names. Dates. Relationships. Patterns. People who didn't just attend parties, but allegedly funded lifestyles, moved money, applied pressure, and ensured silence. She said the list circulated privately among producers early in development and was treated like radioactive material. Something everyone acknowledged, but nobody wanted to be responsible for releasing. And this is where her accusations against 50 Cent sharpened. Jaguar didn't say he created the list. She said he knew about it. She said he understood exactly how far the documentary could go without collapsing under lawsuits. According to her, the final Then the leaks got darker. An anonymous account claiming to be a former production assistant posted a thread alleging that interviews were halted mid-session once certain names came up. They claimed cameras were turned off. Audio was scrubbed. Legal teams intervened, in real time. No proof was offered, but the specificity made it spread like wildfire. Jaguar reposted it without comment, which her supporters took as confirmation. Another supposed insider claimed Jaguar's segments were cut not because they were unverified, but because they connected dots too clearly. That her commentary didn't just accuse individuals, it mapped systems. And systems are dangerous, because you can't sue a system as easily as you can sue a person. Jaguar went back live, visibly angrier. She said the industry doesn't punish predators, it recycles them until they become liabilities. She said Diddy didn't fall because justice suddenly mattered. He fell because he stopped being manageable. And once he crossed that line, the machine turned on him while protecting everyone else who'd played their role better. Then she made a claim that sent chills through even her skeptics. She alleged there was footage involving younger artists that never aired. Not explicit footage, but footage that raised questions nobody wanted to answer publicly. She specifically referenced Justin Bieber, saying attempts to include certain timelines were blocked immediately. She framed it as pattern recognition, not accusation, saying the industry has a long history of placing young talent in unsafe proximity to power and then erasing the paper trail. At that point, the internet fractured. Some people dismissed her as reckless. Others said she was finally saying what everyone whispered but never documented. TikTok creators began stitching old interviews, body language analyses, moments that felt off, in hindsight. Hashtags like "Protect the List" and "Cutting Room Truth" started trending. The conversation wasn't slowing, it was accelerating. And still, 50 Cent said nothing. That silence became its own narrative. Because this was the same man who once mocked entire lawsuits on Instagram. The same man who built a brand on being untouchable. And now, with Jaguar accusing him of protecting a list tied to some of the most powerful figures in entertainment, he was nowhere to be found. Jaguar leaned into that silence. She said if she were lying, she'd already be buried under cease and desist letters. She said if she were wrong, she'd already be sued into oblivion. Instead, she claimed, people were watching. Waiting. Measuring how much she was willing to say before they decided how to respond. She also claimed something else that escalated everything. She said there were copies of the list. Not one. Multiple. That once something exists in this industry, it never fully disappears, it just moves. She suggested that producers, assistants, and even rival executives had seen versions of it. That's when fear replaced curiosity. Because if that were true, it meant the truth wasn't locked away, it was unstable. Fans started speculating about who else might come forward. Who had nothing left to lose. Who might leak a screenshot, a photo, a file name. People began combing through old lawsuits, sealed settlements, NDAs, sudden career disappearances. Patterns emerged that felt too neat to ignore. Jaguar ended that phase of the conversation with a warning that felt less like hype and more like inevitability. She said the industry always underestimates one thing: time. People age out of fear. Loyalties expire. And secrets rot when they're buried too long. She said the list wasn't exposed yet because it wasn't time, but time was approaching. And then she said something that reframed everything. She claimed the documentary wasn't the end of the story. It was the firewall. The thing meant to satisfy the public just enough to stop them from asking harder questions. And once people accepted that version, the real version could stay hidden. But according to Jaguar, that plan failed. Because once you tell people a story and they sense something's missing, they don't forget it. They obsess over it. They dig. And eventually, someone slips. She ended by saying she didn't need to leak the list herself. She just needed people to know it existed. Because once that idea is out there, the silence around it becomes impossible to maintain. And as the internet spiraled deeper into speculation, one final rumor surfaced, quietly, ominously, that someone else connected to the project was preparing to speak. Not an artist. Not a blogger. Someone with access. And if that person talks, Jaguar says, the list won't matter anymore. Because the truth will speak for itself. By the time that final rumor surfaced, the atmosphere around this story stopped feeling like entertainment and started feeling like a countdown. Because Jaguar wasn't just talking anymore, she was predicting. And according to her, the most dangerous phase of any cover-up is the moment right before someone on the inside decides they're done being quiet. She said people were panicking behind the scenes. Not publicly, not on social media, but in boardrooms, law offices, and private group chats that never leak unless someone wants them to. She claimed calls were being made to former collaborators, assistants, and intermediaries, the people who don't show up in credits but know where everything is buried. The ones who signed NDAs they no longer care about because the protection those NDAs promised is starting to look fragile. Jaguar described it like a domino setup that's been standing for decades. One piece falls, and suddenly everyone realizes how close they were to the edge the whole time. Then she went after the psychology of it all. She said the reason the list was cut wasn't just legal, it was strategic. According to her, naming too many people at once would have forced accountability to spread instead of concentrate. The narrative needed a villain, not a network. One monster, not a machine. And Diddy, in her words, became the acceptable sacrifice. The lightning rod. The distraction that allowed others to quietly step back into the shadows. That's when she returned to 50 Cent, not with rage, but with something colder. She said his role wasn't emotional. It was positional. That he understood how power works in this industry better than almost anyone. That he knew when to push and when to stop. And that by producing a documentary that felt explosive but stopped short of full systemic exposure, he managed to look like a disruptor without actually disrupting the structure. No jokes. No lawsuits. No Instagram captions. And the longer that silence stretched, the more it fueled the belief that Jaguar had hit a nerve she wasn't supposed to touch. At the same time, celebrity reactions, or the lack of them, started telling their own story. People who normally rushed to comment stayed quiet. Others posted unrelated content, flooding their feeds with distractions. A few deleted old photos that fans had already screenshotted years ago. It was subtle, but to an audience already suspicious, it felt coordinated. Then came the meltdown phase. Fans turned on each other. Accusations of protecting predators flew in comment sections. Twitter threads turned into digital tribunals. TikTok creators claimed to have decoded the list by analyzing party photos, flight logs, and old interviews. Some of it was nonsense. Some of it was unsettling. All of it kept the story alive. Jaguar watched it unfold and didn't celebrate. She said the chaos wasn't the goal. The goal was accountability. But she also said chaos is what happens when the truth is rationed. When people are given just enough information to feel informed, but not enough to feel satisfied. That gap, she argued, is where paranoia thrives. Then she dropped one more claim that changed the tone again. She said she had been warned, directly, that continuing to talk would make things complicated. Not threatened outright. Not intimidated in obvious ways. Just warned. The kind of warning that implies consequences without spelling them out. She said it only confirmed what she already believed, that the list wasn't imaginary, and it wasn't harmless. She talked about how this industry survives on selective memory. How people rewrite history by editing it, not erasing it. How documentaries, books, and retrospectives become tools to shape legacy rather than challenge it. And she said this one followed that pattern perfectly. Then she turned the spotlight back on the audience. She said the reason this moment matters isn't because of who's being accused, it's because of who keeps being protected. She said as long as the public accepts partial truth as full truth, nothing really changes. The names rotate. The power doesn't. Jaguar ended her most recent appearance with something that sounded less like a threat and more like a prophecy. She said secrets don't stay buried forever because they aren't kept by one person. They're kept by systems. And systems fail when enough small parts stop working together. A producer who retires. An assistant who cleans out an old hard drive. A lawyer who misses a deadline. A journalist who stops caring about access. She said the list doesn't need to be leaked dramatically. It just needs to surface accidentally. And then she said this, when it does, you're going to recognize the names. And you're going to realize you've been seeing them the whole time. That's where the story sits now. No official confirmations. No official denials. Just a documentary that suddenly feels incomplete, a list that may or may not exist, and an industry behaving like it knows something is coming. Because whether Jaguar Wright is right about every detail or not, she's forced one undeniable shift: people are no longer asking what Diddy did. They're asking who else walked away clean, and why. And once the public starts asking that question, there's no documentary powerful enough to put the genie back in the bottle. If you're still here, don't scroll away now, because this is exactly how stories like this get buried. Not by denials. Not by lawsuits. But by distraction and silence. The moment attention drops, the questions stop, and whatever truth was circling the surface sinks back into the dark where it's comfortable. That's how it always works. If this documentary felt incomplete to you, if Jaguar's words made you uncomfortable in a way that wouldn't let go, then you already understand what's happening. This isn't about picking sides. It's about refusing to accept half answers when the stakes are this high. Every like tells the algorithm this conversation matters. Every comment keeps this story from being quietly pushed off timelines. And subscribing right now isn't about loyalty to a channel, it's about staying ahead of the cleanup. Because the next leak won't come with context. The next statement won't trend on purpose. And the next person who speaks may only do it once before the door slams shut again. Miss that moment, and you'll be left reading summaries written by people who never wanted the full truth out in the first place. Stay here. Stay alert. Stay uncomfortable. Because discomfort is usually the signal that you're close to something real. This story isn't done. It's just paused. And when it starts moving again, you'll want to be here before the narrative gets rewritten in real time.